think it's safe to say that everyone has that one anime that changed them from casual fan to full-on degenerate weeb. In many cases, we were introduced to the medium through shows like Pokemon, Digimon, or Dragon Ball, but there's always that one series that serves as our point of no return, and mine is the topic of today's episode of Anime Ambush. I have isolated memories of being a small, impressionable middle schooler who wanted nothing more than the plots of his favorite anime to happen to him IRL. If only he could be like Edward Elric, for example, then maybe he'd be less socially awkward around girls. Or if he could be like the protagonist of a manga like I Love You and have someone express interest in him without it being a prank, then maybe school wouldn't be such a drag. I was a very angsty teen, but I also remember attending my local library's anime club and watching the first episodes of titles such as Pani Poni Dash, Moon Phase, and Mahou Sensei Negima. Mahou Sensei Negima is a manga written and illustrated by Ken Akamatsu, the creator of Love Hina, I Love You, and the father of the modern harem manga. It follows a young wizard named Negi Springfield, who, in order to complete his training and to find his missing father, has to teach a class of 31 Japanese middle school students at Mahou Academy. If you have anything resembling a brain, I can imagine you can see where the harem haramanigans, begin. But what if I told you that Mahou Sensei Negima is, in actuality, a shonen battle manga? If you're anime only, there's a fair chance you'd never realize it, but at some point, what was once a traditional rom-com / slice of life series was forever changed into a shonen battle series akin to Hunter x Hunter or One Piece. Unlike either of those, while Mahou Sensei Negima had multiple anime adaptations, none of them really stand out as a definitive retelling of the story, and to add insult to injury, finding the manga in a legal capacity can be a challenge in and of itself. In today's episode of Anime Ambush, let's take an in-depth look at Mahou Sensei Negima and its countless adaptations as we seek to answer the question, why haven't they been able to get it right? Mahou Sensei Negima was serialized in Kodansha's weekly shonen magazine from February 26, 2003 until March 14, 2012, and was collected into 38 volumes. It followed Negi Springfield, the anime version of Harry Potter, who was tasked with becoming an English professor for a class of gifted and talented middle school students, which also doubles as his Tinder profile. It served as the ideal successor to the pure rom-com elements of Love Hina, while also adopting some qualities from shonen genre icons such as Hunter x Hunter or One Piece, even going so far as to mirror the power scaling of each. I didn't get to read the manga in its entirety because I simply didn't have the money or attention span to read a story of that length as a teen, but the segmented story beats I did read were fantastic. I fondly remember picking up the manga at around the time the Shiroki Tsubasa Ala Alba OVAs released, as I needed to know what was next for our heroes, but I fell off shortly afterwards and didn't pick it back up until the final chapter dropped, which I read without context, just so I could get some closure. I'll admit, that entire last arc fell into a bottomless memory hole for me, to the point where the only reason I remember what happened is because I read a recap more recently. It was a largely forgettable ending. I wonder why that is, though. It would seem that, thanks to non-disclosure agreements, the truth is shrouded in secrecy, but I think we can put together a portrait of what happened based on what information we do have. Now, it needs to be said that this is by no means a factual account. Any evidence presented here is speculative and circumstantial at best. I wish we had more to go on to discern what happened behind the scenes of Mahou Sensei Negima, but We don't, so we have to speculate. It all begins, like with most things that haunt the nightmares of anime creators on YouTube, with Japan's copyright law and how it employs the term neighboring rights. In Japan, copyright consists of two concepts: author's rights and neighboring rights. Author's rights can be further divided into moral rights, which allow the author to choose when and how their work is made available to the public, how their authorship is represented, as well as the modification of their work. And economic rights, which allow the author to control the reproduction, communication, and adaptation of their work. Neighboring rights, on the other hand, refer to the rights of anyone who plays a crucial role in communicating a work to the public, such as performers, broadcasters, or those who assist in the creation of manga. On March 16th, 2012, a whole 2 days after the publication of the final chapter, Akamatsu published a blog on his Tumblr entitled "Why Publishers Want Neighboring Rights," where he describes a meeting with Yasumasa Shimizu of Kodansha and Naoki Gokita of the Editorial General Affairs Bureau regarding the idea of publishers attaining neighboring rights over the manga made under their umbrella. Based on a very rough translation of the blog, it would seem that, after this meeting, Akamatsu was left underwhelmed and unconvinced, and goes on to suggest that the system was fine as it was and didn't need an overhaul. Kodansha, publisher of Mahou Sensei Negima, didn't have a reply for Akamatsu's questions, and it's unclear whether or not publication companies were granted neighboring rights, though if this 2018 essay written by Simone Schroff of the University of Amsterdam is any indication, they were not. The Japanese manga market is a mature market where the successful exploitation of creative works is not based on the ex-ante assignment of copyright or its exclusive rights. Instead, manga artists, mangaka, commonly keep their copyright and continue to influence the exploitation of their work, including when their work is adapted into other media, merchandise, and translations. As a result, Japanese comic publishers or other commercial intermediaries do not have the same level of control as their Western counterparts have because they do not own the copyright in the underlying manga. In either case, it would seem that Akamatsu and Kodansha were not seeing eye to eye regarding the concept of neighboring rights, but there is no evidence to suggest that this is the reason fans were left with such a sour taste in their mouths when it came to the final chapter of Mahou Sensei Negima. Especially when you consider the ill-fated sequel UQ Holder, which was also published by Kodansha. If Akamatsu had a problem with Kodansha, which was the understanding that I held for literal years, logic would dictate that he wouldn't jump headfirst into another contract with them. So, all this to say, it looks as if copyright law wasn't necessarily the reason for Mahou Sensei Negima's abrupt and jarring finale. This is just an example of proximity bias. Akamatsu was focused on the topic of neighboring rights around the time it ended, and as a result, some readers assumed causation rather than correlation. Is it possible that Akamatsu was driven to end Mahou Sensei Negima only to turn around and immediately start a sequel with the same publisher, all because he was concerned about the possibility of Kodansha being granted neighboring rights? I mean, sure, we would never know for certain, but considering he announced a run for the House of Counselors in the National Diet in Japan, anything's possible? I am not kidding. I don't know another IP that has had such bad luck when it comes to animated adaptations. It's par for the course when a manga is turned into an anime with only one season and never continues, but that's weak sauce compared with the 9 different attempts to bring Mahou Sensei Negima to the big and small screen. As much as it hurts, sometimes you need to ask yourself, is this even worth it? If you've ever heard of Mahou Sensei Negima, there's a great chance it was the series by Studio Zebec. But before that, a trio of OVAs was produced to introduce the admittedly bloated cast. Also by Zebec, these short episodes exist primarily to give you the digestible version of the premise, including one that reenacts the first chapter of the manga, one that partially reenacts chapter 2, and then one that reenacts chapter 13. Interestingly enough, despite these also being produced by Zebec, the school nurse, known as Shizuna Miyamoto, is blonde in the introduction OVAs while she has blue hair in the full series. That's not the only example of aesthetic change between the OVAs and series. Heck, it's not even the only example of characters' hair changing color. Zebec's full adaptation ran in Japan from winter to summer 2005, and while it tries its best to cover some of the events from the manga's first 3 volumes, it ultimately fails to be a true adaptation and ends with a very strange 4-episode arc involving a main character making a deal with the literal devil and dying in the process. I couldn't make this up if I tried, folks. One of the most devastating scenes to a young and impressionable pixelation was the lengthy and, to be honest, kind of unnecessary death and funeral scenes. I don't even want to think about all the angsty AMVs I made using that footage. In any case, that was the last time Zebec so much as touched the IP. I imagine between making the series almost unrecognizable as an adaptation of the original manga and capping it off with a weird anime original ending, there were multiple reasons for Kodansha and Akamatsu to take back the license. Zebec would go on to adapt such works as To Love Brew, Keijo, and Full Metal Panic Invisible Victory before their parent company, IG Port, sold the studio to Sunrise, who has since established a new studio, Sunrise Beyond, at their now former address. In 2006, a new series was announced that would be using characters from the IP, but notice I'm not calling it an adaptation, and that's on purpose because it wasn't an adaptation. Negima, now with a question mark as if to say, "This is Negima?" was animated by Shaft, who would go on to create such masterworks as Puella Magi Madoka Magica and the Monogatari series, and they would opt to write an entirely original storyline to avoid falling into the same holes as their predecessors. And, believe it or not, this one might have been the best the IP had to offer. Mahou Sensei Negima and Shaft were a match made in Mundus Magicus, and it's clear the powers that be recognized that, as the license would remain in their capable hands for over a decade, but we'll get to that in a bit. So, I mentioned how the series by Shaft wasn't really an adaptation of Mahou Sensei Negima, which makes the next several productions stranger. In 2006, 2 OVAs were produced, named Spring and Summer, respectively. The first of which was an adaptation of an arc from the 7th volume of the manga, while the second was an original story. It sounds to me that this was the first time anyone involved in the production of a Negima anime recognized the value of offering a legitimate adaptation, even if it was only 2 chapters worth. It's okay. The next entry in this series' history adapted 8. In 2008, Shaft and Studio Pastoral collaborated to adapt chapters 176 to 183 of the manga, otherwise known as Mahou Sensei Negima Shiroki Tsubasa Ala Alba, and, at least to me, it seemed at the time that even if it was in the form of disjointed OVAs, we might get the remainder of the manga adapted, and for the most part, that is kind of how it ended up. Akamatsu mentioned that if the pre-orders for the first Shiroki Tsubasa Ala Alba OVA exceeded 50,000, the team would consider making a movie, while if they exceeded 100,000, they'd consider making a 3rd series. Discounting how cruel and annoying it is to hold your fanbase hostage like that, what did the pre-order count end up being? 82,500 1981. It's not all bad, however, as starting in 2009 and extending into 2010, we received a fourth set of OVAs titled Mohitotsu no Sekai that picked up right where the previous OVAs left off, adapting a whopping 32 chapters across 5 episodes. I can't remember if I've seen any of these, so I can't recall if they felt particularly rushed. But considering the average manga to anime conversion ratio is 4 volumes per 12 episodes, and considering these chapters span 4 volumes, I'd say they probably felt rushed. But it was a step in the right direction that they did not capitalize on. Remember when I said Akamatsu mentioned that they'd consider making a movie if pre-orders for the first Ala Alba OVA exceeded 50,000? In 2011, Mahou Sensei Negima anime final released in theaters as a double bill with the Hayate the Combat Butler movie. I want to say I watched this, but it's since been wiped from my subconscious, so take from that what you will. It was one last hurrah for the idea of a proper adaptation of Mahou Sensei Negima, and it was an alternate anime original ending. I wish I had better news for y'all. I wish I could tell you that in the 11 years since this movie's premiere, that they figured out the secret to properly adapting Mahou Sensei Negima. I wish I could tell you that. But instead, alas, I have to be the one to tell you that this was the final attempt. Even the live-action adaptation, which aired in late 2007 and starred a former AV star as well as a former member of the girl group Momohiro Clover Z, was an original story. It seems to me that everyone involved, from Kodansha to Ken Akamatsu to Zebec and now Shaft, are responsible for failing Mahou Sensei Negima at every turn. In 2016, almost 5 years after the anime final film was released, an adaptation of UQ Holder was announced to start airing the following year. I had no words. Not only had they totally disrespected the fan base by never properly adapting this story, but they had the audacity to try adapting the sequel. I say try because, in the end, it fell into the trap of one core anime that never get a second season, and, as strange as it may sound, I am fine with that. I will always have the memories associated with Mahou Sensei Negima. It may be a franchise that forever remains in production hell, at least until Akamatsu needs something to occupy his time once his political ambitions dry up, but I will always have the memories of being a horny teenager who wanted nothing more than to be a harem protagonist. I hate that I just said that, but fuck it, emotional character arc time. I don't know the real reason why it seems like every facet of this series has a disappointing end, but if you've made it to this point in the video, I still recommend it. I don't regret my time with Mahou Sensei Negima. I don't regret the memories I have. Oh, okay, maybe some of the memories. But at the end of the day, you never forget your first time, and I credit this series with introducing me to some of the best works of fiction this world has to offer, and a whole bunch of garbage. Hey, all you bits and bobs out there, thank you so much for watching. This was a really fun video to put together. I love Negima, I just wish it were better. If you would like to see your name in the credits of every single one of my videos from here into infinity, head on over to the Pixelation Patreon, Otherwise, you know the drill. Subscribe if you aren't subscribed. Go follow me on Twitch. I'm streaming weekly. I'd love to see you over there. In the meantime, this has been Pixelation, reminding every single one of you to stay pixelated.